Here's something nobody wants to admit. The men who built this country, the ones in the work boots who came home from the war and poured the concrete, were mostly worse at talking about their feelings than you are. They didn't journal. They didn't open up. And yet, a man in 1962 was almost never lonely. Today, with all our therapy and all our talking, 1 in 2 adults says he is. So it was never about vulnerability. It was about something we tore down on purpose. Let me say the thing that ties this whole video together, then I'll prove it to you. Brotherhood in the 1960s was not a personality. It was not luck. It was infrastructure. A man back then didn't go hunting for friends the way you hunt for your car keys. His friendships were built into the week, the same way the milk got delivered. He didn't find his brothers. He attended them. And here's what the app-addicted modern world will never tell you. The loneliness you feel isn't a flaw in your character. It's a flaw in your calendar. The buildings are gone. The standing nights are gone. We didn't make men colder. We demolished the architecture that made friendship automatic, then sold them an app to fix it. So here are 15 rules, not feelings, but concrete things the 1960s man had that you don't. And the one principle underneath all of them, that once you see it, you can't unsee. We're counting down. Number 15. First, hit that subscribe button, because this list is about to change how you think about why you can feel completely alone in a room full of people. Number 15. The standing night. Every man in 1963 had a night that belonged to something. Tuesday was the bowling league. Thursday was poker. It wasn't a maybe. It was a fixed point in the week, solid as payday. You bowled with the same 8 men so long you knew each one's average, his bad knee, and his daughter's name. Why did it work? Robin Dunbar, the Oxford researcher who has spent his life studying friendship, found that closeness is built almost entirely by repeated, regular contact. Miss enough of it, and a friendship quietly demotes itself, no matter how much you once liked the man. The standing night made that contact non-negotiable. You didn't have to feel like going. You just went, because it was Tuesday. They didn't have Dunbar's research. They just knew you put your friends on the calendar in ink. The standing night did the remembering for you. Number 14. The barbershop regular. A man in 1960 didn't have a barber. He had his barber. Same chair, same fellow, every few weeks for 20 years. A cut ran about $1 and change. But you weren't paying for the haircut. You were paying for the bench. Men waited along the wall longer than the cut took, arguing about the ball game, perfectly content. The sociologist Ray Oldenburg named this in his book, The Great Good Place. He called it the third place. Not home, not work, but a spot where a man is known. His sharpest point was this: these places level every man down to equal. The banker and the bricklayer wait in the same row of chairs. Status drops at the door, and what's left is just men talking. They didn't have the term third place. They just had a place where the fellow knew your name before you sat down. Number 13. The Lodge. The Elks. The Moose. The Masons. Joining a fraternal order was as ordinary for a working man as owning a hat. You paid your dues, learned the handshake, showed up, and in return, you had a hall full of men obligated to you, and you to them. When a brother's roof caved in, the lodge showed up with hammers. When a brother died, the lodge buried him. Here's the number that should stop you cold. Robert Putnam, in his book Bowling Alone, tracked the collapse. Masonic membership fell roughly 39% from its peak. The Elks dropped. The Shriners dropped. We didn't replace these halls. We just stopped walking into them, one empty chair at a time. Why did the lodge work where a group chat fails? Because it asks something of you. Obligation, not enjoyment, is the glue of a lasting bond. They didn't have Putnam's charts. They just paid their dues and kept their word. But the way these men actually bonded ran against everything you've been told. Stay with me. Number 12. The side-by-side rule. Here's where modern advice gets it backwards. You've been told real friendship means sitting across from a man and talking about your feelings. That's how women tend to bond, face to face, through confiding. Robin Dunbar found men bond a different way entirely. Shoulder to shoulder, over a task. The talk comes sideways, while the hands are busy. The 1960s man knew this without a study. He didn't invite a buddy over to catch up. He invited him to help reshingle the garage. He didn't schedule a heart-to-heart. He went fishing. And somewhere in the third hour of silence, the real things got said. The activity wasn't the excuse for the friendship. The activity was the friendship. They didn't have a term for it. They just handed you the other end of the board. Stop trying to talk your way into friendship. Build something next to a man instead. Number 11. The Corner Tavern. Not a bar you drive 20 minutes to. A tavern at the end of the block you could walk to after your shift. A bottle of Schlitz for a couple of dimes. The same stools. A bartender who started pouring when he saw you in the doorway. You stopped in for one on the way home. Not to get drunk, but to decompress among your own kind before you walked through your own front door. This is Oldenburg's third place, doing quiet, essential work. It caught a man in the gap between the factory and the family and gave him 20 minutes of low-stakes brotherhood. No appointment, no text. You just appeared, and the men who happened to be there were your evening. They didn't have a phrase for it. They just had a stool with their shape worn into it. Number 10. The Union Brotherhood. When a man took a job in the plant or the mill in 1960, he did not just get a paycheck. He got a local, a hall, a steward, and a few hundred men who would walk off the line for him. Work was not a place you went alone to be productive. It came packaged with a band of brothers who shared your grievance, your lunch pail, and your fate. The bond of shared hardship is one of the oldest forces known to man. The Harvard study of adult development, the longest study of happiness ever run, tracking the same men since 1938, found the single strongest predictor of a long, healthy life was not money or fame. It was the quality of a man's relationships. And nothing forges them faster than a shared struggle. They did not have 80 years of Harvard data. They just knew the man beside you on the line was the man you could count on. Number 9, the walkable street. Picture it, houses close together, front porches facing the sidewalk, not back decks facing a privacy fence. A man sat out after dinner, and the whole social life of the block walked past him. The neighbor heading to the store. The fellow 2 doors down who leaned on the railing to complain about the tigers for half an hour. This is what planners now mourn as the death of the chance encounter. The old neighborhood was engineered without anyone meaning to, so you bumped into people. Friendship needs proximity, the way fire needs oxygen. The Surgeon General's 2023 advisory said it plainly. Our environments now actively discourage connection. Back then, the environment did the opposite without trying. They didn't have a study on the built environment. They just had a porch that pointed at the street. The architecture remembered you. Ours forgets. Number 8, the pew. Whatever you believe, look at what the weekly service did. Every Sunday, the same families filled the same pews. The same men shook the same hands afterward over the same lukewarm coffee. A guaranteed, whole community gathering that asked nothing but your presence. And your presence was noticed when it was missing. Putnam tracked this collapse too, right alongside the lodges and the leagues. Why did it matter for loneliness? Because it was automatic. A man did not have to organize anything or feel social. He walked in, and 100 familiar faces were already there. The hardest part of modern friendship is the organizing, the texting, the scheduling, the endless "we should really get together." The pew did all of it for you, every week, for free. They did not call it automatic community. They just knew where they would be on Sunday, and so did everyone else. Number 7, the service club. The veterans of foreign wars. The American Legion. The Lions. These were men who gathered not just to drink and not just to pray, but to do something. Run the pancake breakfast, march in the parade, bury a veteran with honors. Shared mission on top of shared presence. That stacks 2 of the strongest forces we've covered. The side-by-side activity men bond over, and a purpose bigger than yourself. A man who is needed by his community doesn't sit alone in the dark wondering if he matters. He's too busy. He's expected at 7 o'clock. The Holt-Lundstad review of nearly 150 studies found men with strong social ties were about 50% more likely to still be alive over the study period than the isolated ones. 50%. That's not a hobby. That's life extension with a membership card. They didn't have the analysis. They just had a cause and a calendar. Number 6, the workshop, the garage, the basement bench, the ham radio shack. The 1960s man had a place where things got built and fixed, and it was rarely occupied by one man for long. You pulled an engine with a buddy because you physically couldn't do it alone. The project required a second pair of hands, which in turn required a second man. This is the side-by-side rule made physical. The task creates a legitimate reason to spend 6 hours together without it ever being needy. No man in 1965 felt awkward asking another to help rebuild a carburetor. Ask that same kind of man today to just hang out with no reason and watch him squirm. We lost the excuse, and the project was the excuse. They didn't have a name for it. They just couldn't lift the transmission alone. Number 5. Now we're getting to the ones that matter. The mentor chain. In the trades and the neighborhood, older men deliberately pulled younger men up. The journeyman taught the apprentice. The uncle taught the nephew to fish, to shave, to shake a hand like he meant it. There was a chain. Every man had someone above him teaching him, and someone below him he was responsible for. You were never the loneliest or most useless man in the room, because the room was built in layers. The Harvard study found something quietly devastating. The men who thrived into old age weren't the richest at 50. They were the ones still connected, still giving something to someone younger. A man with someone to teach has a reason to get up. A man who is only alone slowly goes out like a pilot light. They didn't have the longest happiness study in history. They just knew you owed the young men what the old men gave you. Number 4. The long goodbye. The no agenda hang. This one is almost impossible to explain to a modern man because it looks like nothing. 2 men on a tailgate or a couple of upturned buckets in the garage, doing nothing productive for 2 or 3 hours. No event, no game on, just presence. The conversation wandered or stopped entirely, and neither man checked a phone because there was no phone to check. We've lost the capacity for purposeless time together, and that is exactly where the deepest bonding happens. The talk that matters never comes in the first 20 minutes. It comes in hour 2, when the small talk runs dry and a man finally says the real thing. Modern friendship gets scheduled in 90-minute blocks and ends right when it was about to get good. They didn't have a word for quality time. They just had time, and they spent it on each other. Number 3. You showed up in the flesh. When a man hadn't seen his friend in a while, he didn't send a text. There was no text. He drove over. He knocked. He showed up at the shop, the bar, the front step, in his body, in the room. Presence was the only currency there was, so men spent it freely. Here's the cruel irony of our age. We have more ways to stay in touch than any humans who ever lived, and men are lonelier than they've ever been measured to be. The Survey Center on American Life found the share of men with no close friends at all rose from 3% in 1990 to 15% today. A 5-fold collapse, right alongside the rise of every device that promised to connect us. A text is not a presence. A like is not a visit. The body has to show up. They didn't have to be told to show up in person. It was the only kind of showing up there was. Number 2, membership was an obligation. Pull it all together. The lodge, the league, the pew, the service club. And you find the same bolt holding every one of them down. You were expected. Your absence was noticed. There was a chair with your name on it. And if it sat empty 2 weeks running, a man came looking for you. Friendship wasn't a buffet you grazed when convenient. It was a duty you owed, and being owed back is the warmest feeling a man can have. This is the exact thing the modern world stripped out and called freedom. We made every gathering optional, every commitment cancelable, and a frictionless friendship is one that quietly evaporates. The Surgeon General's advisory found that lacking social connection raises a man's risk of early death by more than 60%, on par with smoking 15 cigarettes a day. We optimized away the obligation, and the obligation was the medicine. They didn't know it was medicine. They just knew you don't leave a brother's chair empty. Quick thing before the last one. If this has been worth your time, do a small channel one favor and tap that like button. It's the single move that helps this reach the next man who needs to hear it. All right. Number 1. Friendship was a place, not a feeling. This is the principle underneath all 14 others. The one I promised you at the start. For the 1960s man, friendship was not a feeling he waited to have. It was a place he went. The lane, the lodge, the pew, the porch, the tavern. He didn't sit at home wondering if his friends still liked him, scrolling, hoping someone would reach out. He put on his coat and went to where the Brotherhood was kept, because Brotherhood had an address. And that is exactly what we destroyed. Not the men, the places. We closed the lodges and the union halls. We emptied the pews. We fenced the yards and stretched the distances and swapped the third place for a screen. Then we turned to a generation of men standing in the rubble and asked them why they couldn't just be more vulnerable. As if the problem were inside them. It was never inside them. We bulldozed the buildings where their fathers kept their friends, handed them a phone, and called it progress. Loneliness, for the modern man, isn't a character defect. It's a homelessness. He has nowhere to go to be a brother. They didn't have the studies. They had the buildings. We have the studies, and we tore the buildings down. So when somebody tells you those men were colder, or that you're lonely today because you don't open up enough, you'll know better. The 1960s man wasn't more emotional than you. In a lot of ways, he was less. What he had was structure. A week with Brotherhood built into it. A life with an address for friendship. He didn't have to be good at connection, because his world connected him whether he was good at it or not. That should give you hope, not despair. If loneliness were a flaw in you, you'd be stuck with it. But it's a flaw in the structure, and structure can be rebuilt. One standing night, one third place, one project that needs a second pair of hands. These aren't quaint old habits from a faded photo. They're the right ones. So pick one this week. The easy version: show up somewhere in person you'd normally text. Drive over, knock, appear. A little deeper: start a standing night One fellow, same evening every week, in ink. And if you want to rebuild it from the foundation, find your third place. A shop, a hall, a bench, somewhere they'll learn your name. Because here's what those old men knew in their bones, and we forgot on purpose. A brother was never something you found. He was somewhere you went. So tell me one thing down in the comments. Of all 15, which door would you walk back into first? The lodge on a Thursday night, or the corner tavern after your shift? I want to know which one is calling you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.